Thank you, Rafa. Thank you, One Ocean, and thank you all for coming. So my job here is to argue for how we could build an economy around blue capital, and it's fitting to be here in a business school to talk about it because I'm going to talk about the business of building an economy. But the question is, where do we start this conversation? Just to recap what my colleague Carlos was talking about, we are facing twin risks. Let's remind ourselves. And the twin risks are materializing due to human activity. Now, those that work on climate change believe that the solution is through carbon reduction of emissions and grabbing carbon from the atmosphere. And those that work on nature believe that the way to reduce the risk to nature and loss of biodiversity is by protecting nature, allowing it to rejuvenate. The question is, we need to do both at the same time because we are in the 11th hour and we are running out of time. The question is, how are we going to do so? Oh, here's a solution, as Carlos was talking about. If you're in the climate team, you think the way to go through to solve the climate issue again is through the reduction in emissions. I call that closing the tap that's dripping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But if you come through it from the nature side, as Carlos is doing, you realize very quickly that it's not really only about shutting off the tap, but you need to drain the tub. Simply put, we have a problem of stock and flow. There's a flow of emissions into the atmosphere. If today all of us were to shut off that valve, all of us go to emissions zero, we're still going to bake to death because the carbon that is accumulated in the atmosphere will continue to warm up the earth. So we need two solutions. We have two objectives. We have two solutions. And one is to shut off the valve and to drain the tub. And draining the tub is really where nature-based solutions come in because they're the ones who are going to help us grab the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, as Carlos was talking about. Okay, so we have the solution. What to do? Invest in nature. You protect nature, and nature boomerangs back by grabbing carbon for us from the atmosphere. So we know what to do. Question is, how are we going to do it? Well, Carlos just explained to us that the oceans are the carbon sink, whether the phytoplankton grab carbon or be it closer to shore, salt marshes, mangrove, seagrass. These are all living bodies that grab carbon on behalf of humanity. And of course, the open ocean, the orphan that belongs to no one and therefore belongs to everyone, has been grabbing carbon since time immemorial. But let's not forget that it's not only about fauna, but also flora. Flora, be it on land or be it in the sea, they also play a role in grabbing carbon from the atmosphere. For example, the elephants, and that's the work of Fabio Berzaghi, who is sitting somewhere in the audience here, who showed that the elephants help to sequester carbon in the forests by at least 14%. And also, if you like, the whales, the great whales also help to sequester carbon in the oceans. This is the latest paper by Oswald Schmidt and Fabio Berzaghi and others showing the 9 trophic animals that help in the fight against climate change. So the lesson here is nature can help us fight climate change, but nature, not only trees and not only just the vegetation in the ocean, but it's nature, and fauna and flora interacting with each other, creating this beautiful web of life that helps us to fight climate change and rebalance our lives. So science, up to here, science is saying, this is what Carlos is saying, science is telling us nature is incredibly valuable. It's valuable, it's invaluable intrinsically, and it's also invaluable to our own existence. Question is, can we value this intrinsic value of nature? Can we put it in a language that we've chosen for ourselves in market economies, which is the language of dollars and cents? And the answer is yes, we can do so, because nature, for example, through one service alone, grabbing of carbon, we can go back to that service and value it. Why? Because there is the price for carbon. Using the price for carbon, we can go back and look at the service that each natural asset is actually producing and value their services. So we can go back into the ocean and ask and figure out how much does a whale, what is the value of the carbon sequestration by a whale, okay? And if you were to do this exercise, you'd come up with at least $2 million per whale. That would be the expected discounted present value, the lifetime earnings of a whale just from sequestering carbon. Same thing, this is work we did with Fabio. We looked at what is the value of the carbon sequestration by the elephants in the Congo Basin, and that's at least $1.75 million per living elephant. We can do the same thing with vegetation in the ocean. These are examples of projects we've had. In Florida, the mangroves, you can see it's 1.6 million. Salt marshes in England, 1.5 million per square kilometers. And this is work with Carlos, who taught us, basically, that seagrass does something really cool. It grows exponentially for 50 years and continues to grow at a constant rate forever. Just imagine if you could invest in a company that will grow exponentially for 50 years and continues to grow forever. What would be the value of that company? Over $1 trillion. So seagrass alone, just from carbon sequestration, is worth over $1 trillion. So nature, science tells us nature is valuable. We can value it in dollars and cents and figure out that it's incredibly valuable. So you would think because nature is so valuable financially, money must be coming in hand over fist to invest in nature. And the answer is, unfortunately, not. This diagram is to show you how little money is coming into the protection of nature, although it's incredibly valuable. And the only money that you see here is philanthropic money. And you can see how little it is. And we have a financing gap. If we want to protect nature, help nature rejuvenate, we really need about $700 billion per year. Now, where's it going to come from? Well, I can stand here and ask you to contribute some more money, but you're not going to get more than that. Or we can go to the governments and besiege them to give us more money, and they're not going to give us money because they have other things that they're interested in. So where's the money going to come from? The proposition in front of you here is that since we're in a business school, we're going to make an investment proposition. We're going to show you that you can actually invest in nature, not philanthropically, not out of altruism, purely out of value proposition. So let me show you how we're going to do this. So on the left-hand side, you see the potential buyers of services of nature. Let's say it's about carbon. So on the left-hand side, there are companies that have made pledges to go carbon zero, carbon negative, carbon neutral, and they need to purchase carbon sequestration from someone that has the technology that would sequester carbon. On the right-hand side would be those owners of natural assets, mangrove, seagrass, salt marsh, if you like trees on land too. Now what I put for you here is, I'm a financial economist, and I've worked in financial market development for 30 years. What are the issues that we need to solve if we want to bring investors into this space? What would an investor want to know? So the first thing so if you're asking someone to come in and invest in blue carbon, the first thing that the investor is going to ask you is, tell me about the future. Tell me about, you want me to buy the carbon of your seagrass. Tell me about how much carbon is your seagrass going to grab today, tomorrow, next year, the year after, for the next 10 years, because you want my money today. So you need to tell me something about the future. Can we project the carbon sequestration of a living system? And the second problem that you need to solve to bring investment forward is who owns that asset. We're used to trading assets on land, but now you're talking about assets in the water. Do you own the seagrass? If you want to sell me the carbon of the seagrass, do you own it? The third problem is, well, I'm Microsoft, and you want me to invest in the carbon of the seagrass of Bahamas, but I'm in Seattle, and the asset is sitting in the Bahamas. How do I know that that asset is being looked after? I don't want to take the word of the government, with all due respect. I need someone to verify the words of the government. Okay? In economics, we call it solving a problem of asymmetric information. The other problem that we face is what we call time consistency. When you are buying, remember, we want to bring investment forward. So you want to take my money today for the next 5, 10 years. How do I know that you, as a buyer, as a seller, you won't change your mind and you replace the asset with a marina? Suddenly you decide, well, I don't want to see any more seagrass. let's build a marina. But I've given you my money today. So how are you going to solve that problem? How do you make it renegotiation proof? The fifth one really is a problem not really for us, but for the whole world. We're looking at when you look at what's going on all around us, there are multiple prices for the same molecule of carbon, multiple definitions of the same thing, and it really is not helpful in actually forming a market. So let me show you quickly how we can solve each of these problems. This is work that we've done in the Cayman Islands. We sat with the scientists and we said, how do the mangroves grab carbon? And they told us, well, mangroves grab carbon, in terms of vertically, carbon per centimeter, and then the asset itself grows over time at a certain rate. You use the chain rule, and you can get on the right-hand side how carbon is going to grow over time. So if you have that graph, I can tell you in expectations how much carbon the mangroves in the fringe area in the Cayman Islands, how much you should expect as an investor in terms of carbon flows over the next 10, 20, 15 years. This is based on the work of Carlos. On the left-hand side, you see how the seagrass grows exponentially for 50 years, then at a constant rate forever. Well, if you know this and you know how you have the data, we can build nonlinear projection models, which is on the right-hand side, which more or less mimic reality with the confidence bounds. So you can calculate the standard deviations around the model estimates and around the empirical estimates. And once I have that, then I can go to the investor and say, you should expect, if you want to invest in seagrass, so much carbon for the next 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years. Of course, as you go further into the future, the standard deviations are going to be greater. This is work that Carlos and I and colleagues here from Beneath the Waves are doing in the Bahamas. Bahamas, due to the work of Carlos and Beneath the Waves, this is Nature article, is sitting on 30% of the total mass of seagrass in the world. Now imagine, I just told you seagrass in the world is worth $1 trillion. So the Bahamas is sitting on 30% of it. Potentially, the Bahamas then could be the richest country per capita on the face of the planet. Okay, and the question. So this is remember potentially. So potentially, Bahamas is sitting on $170 billion. Question is, how do we materialize that? Well, it's not enough to project. We need to know, do you own the asset? Right? Does Bahamas own the seagrass? And what the Bahamas government did, they said, yeah, we do. And they published these two reports. And they said, anything that is blue or green belongs to us. So if you want to buy carbon, you deal with me directly. No ambiguity. So if I'm an investor, now I know, we have the models that can project how much carbon the seagrass of the Bahamas can produce into the future, and we know that if we want to buy those, there's only one entity to deal with, which is the government of the Bahamas. Done. Okay. So, but notice what happens from a financial point of view, because we're in a business school. This point is very important. Okay. People confuse two. I hear this all the time, and I'm a financial economist. They say natural capital or natural asset. These two are not the same. A natural asset is not natural capital. For an asset to become capital, it has to be codified in the law. When it's codified in the law, then it enters your balance sheet. Then it changes your net worth. Then the game starts. So when you codify it in the law, for example, in the case of the Bahamas, they said, this asset belongs to us. Boom. That means now we can value it. Now it goes on their balance sheet. Now it changes the net worth of the Bahamas, changes their debt sustainability. It changes the ratings for the whole country. So now you can talk about a new class of assets, a new source of wealth. Now, resolving the information problem. So remember, I'm Microsoft, and I want to invest in the carbon of the Bahamas, but how do I know that they're taking good care of my asset? Well, so let's say Microsoft is on the left, is going to pay money for the services. You're not buying the asset. You're buying the services of the asset. Could be mangrove, seagrass, salt marshes, whatever. And the money is supposed to go to look after the asset in perpetuity and to look after the stewards of nature, indigenous people, local communities. So how do I know that the asset is doing well? Well, guess what? Technology is here. We have now satellite technology. We have sensors in the water. Really, we've come a long way, and that will tell me that the asset is doing great. Now, how do I know that the money is going to the people that's supposed to go? That's using blockchain technology. Blockchain will ensure that we know two sides to the contract, that there's no double counting. We know exactly what's happening. And more importantly, the local communities will be in charge because they'll get to see who they're dealing with, who's buying the asset, who's buying the services of their asset. And if you are Microsoft and you manage to do all of this, look what happens to you. You not only are getting carbon, but you're getting, by investing in the seagrass of the Bahamas, you're investing in sea turtles, as I learned from Carlos, and you're investing in the health and wealth of the apex predator, which is the tiger shark. So now you're talking about not carbon credits, but you're talking about biodiversity credits. And because healthy seagrass means healthy fish stock and defense against flooding, suddenly Microsoft is getting SDGs 1, 3, 8, 10, 13, 14, 15. Now they get to put it on their website that they're a fantastic corporation. It's not about offsetting their carbon. They're investing in nature. They're reducing poverty. They're creating employment. They're stabilizing people in their land. Wonderful story. Now, the fourth problem we have to solve, which is the government makes a commitment, and how do I make sure they don't change their mind a year later? Well, what we advocate is creating something like a nature wealth fund. And all the money from the sale of the carbon goes into that fund. It's an endowment fund. The stock of it belongs to the government, which means it goes on their balance sheet. But the flow, which is the income side, is under strict governance. This flow does not belong to the government. The governance of it sits outside and ensures that the money that Microsoft is paying is indeed going to look after nature in perpetuity and the stewards of nature. This is more, I'm almost done. I'm seeing the evil eye from this side. And this is basically it's a plea really for everybody, because when we look at what's happening in the carbon markets, we have prices all over the place. If you're the global south and you're trying to sell carbon, you get $5, $10, $20 if you're in good shape. But big corporations are buying carbon from a carbon capture machine, imagine. Carbon capture, and they're paying $1,200 a ton. Why? It's the same molecule. Why are you paying $1,200 for a machine? But when a country comes and says, I have nature, 4 billion year old technology, you pay me $10 or $20. It's not helpful. It's not going to lead us to fight climate change, and it will continue to divide us as time is running out. So we need global governance, and perhaps that is a hint to my institution that I just retired from, the IMF, to basically take the charge and harmonize definitions and even the pricing of carbon, because time is really running out. Now, if you were to do all this, I'm done, I promise. Look at the benefits that you would get. If you're a country that is managing to sell the services of living nature, you never sell nature. Look at all these benefits. You're diversifying your revenue. It's a new source of wealth. Your environment is protected because you're looking after your nature. But creating resilience in nature creates resilience in people. When nature is resilient, people don't have to leave their land. We would avoid people on the move, as we're seeing is happening all over the world. Finally, when you reach this, what we call the nature-based solution, or an economy with nature and people at its core, look how wonderful it is. On the left-hand side, the government that has the nature and sells its services, it's going to see its fiscal stance enhanced. It diversifies the economy. That revenue, by the way, is acyclical. It does not depend on tourism, does not depend on the business cycle, does not depend, God forbid, another COVID may come around. And as I said before, the buyer of biodiversity or carbon credits gets not only the carbon credits, not only enhances ESGs, but they get SDGs 1, 3, 8, 10, 13, 14, 15. Who else wins? The indigenous populations or local communities win. And of course, nature wins. So in this new paradigm that Carlos and I are talking about, there are no losers. This idea of a win-lose proposition has really been devastating to us. This paradigm says everybody is a winner, but we win by investing in a living and thriving nature, for nature itself and for its people. Thank you.